we have a Muslim waiting to tell
Go
us why
for
he
it.
believes. Let's do that.
I'm happy to talk to any believer who's willing to actually define what they believe and defend it.
So, with that in mind, Omar in California, you are on the line with Jimmy and Matt.
Hey, guys.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Omar.
Yeah, I guess I called just kind of to answer the question why I believe in God.
Cool. You want to start with what God and why?
Yeah, so, well, I am a Muslim, but, as far as defining God, I kind of want to take a more generic approach to that. I kind of want to strip the fat off and kind of get to the fundamental core of God.
Omar, that's fine. I do want to clarify before you do. Do you believe, though, in the Muslim version of God, what in America we'd probably colloquially call Allah, even though that word could translate to other gods too? But do you believe in the? When you say you want to do that, it reminds me of when a Catholic then wants to start talking about the Kalam, sort of like we want to go back and defend deism, not actually as we strip the fat away. So before we get to the stripped fat away God, do you believe in Allah and the God of Islam?
I do believe in my religion, yes.
Cool, that's fine. And now go ahead and defend if you wanted to. You wanted to defend a stripped away all the fat, just a God at its core. It sounds like, right?
Correct.
Go ahead.
So if we kind of look at all like religions and kind of spiritual thought across all different societies, I think basically we could define God as supernatural and spaceless and timeless. And so then the question kind of becomes like, so my question is, does God exist? That's how I approach it. And to me, I believe it seems to be a matter of fact that God does indeed exist. And the reason I say that is because if we kind of look at the world around us as we understand it, we are bound by space and time. And I feel that it is not possible to stay within these parameters and explain the world around us. I believe that one of these absolute parameters has to be broken to explain the universe around us. And I say absolute because it's not a matter of knowledge or lacking knowledge. It's more a matter of just like what our minds are bound by, which is to say space and time. Since we can only comprehend the universe within this context, since, we are human beings. And yeah, so for that reason, I feel like we can say that something does indeed exist outside of space and time. And so, in a way, that's to say like God does exist. Now, for me to kind of go to the Islamic version of God.
Omar,
we don't need to do that.
Don't jump in.
We can do that in a minute. But so I tried to take notes, although I was confused by some of it, because you said we need to look at the world as we understand it, which is already, yes, we're stuck looking at the world as we understand it, but our understanding may not be accurate or complete. And so reaching conclusions on incomplete or inaccurate understanding is already a problem. But then you said we're bound by space and time. And you said we can't explain reality without violating those boundaries. I don't know what that means, but also, do you have any confirmed example of anything that exists outside or beyond space and time?
Well, I can't like give you positive proof of that because by definition,
so the answer is no.
No, the answer is no.
Okay. So with no examples of anything that exists outside space and time, why would we consider that a possibility that there is, like, I don't know what it means to exist outside of space and time, because if there's no time, then you're talking about something that exists for no quantity of time, and something that exists for no quantity of time is identical to something that doesn't exist. But when we talk about there must be, when you say there must be something that exists outside of space and time, I don't know how you reach that conclusion or that conclusion is even possible, that it's a candidate explanation for anything.
Okay. Yeah. I guess. So what leads me to that conclusion is, I guess when we try to explain, I'll use quotes here for this word creation, we're kind of left with like two avenues. One avenue is, well, everything just always existed, and now we are where we are on this timeline. And the other avenue is, things did not exist and they came into existence. At least the way I understand it, it seems to have to be one of these two.
Like what thing? What thing? Because you say everything always existed, or things did not exist. So give me an example of what would count as a thing under those two sentences.
Well, the rawest form, the word I would use is energy. I guess everything can somewhat be described as energy, including matter.
Okay, but sure, matter and energy. There's transfer between, but I mean, essentially, you're not talking about a tree always existed.
No. Not
okay. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So why is it, how did you determine that? Mm-hmm. So with Big Bang cosmology, time begins with the Big Bang. And so it's absurd to ask about things before the Big Bang, but to whatever extent we can extrapolate beyond the Planck time, there's no reason to determine that there was ever a time when the universe didn't exist. It just wasn't in its current expanded form. So how do you determine that everything hasn't always existed in some form, some way? How do you rule that out?
So the reason I can rule that out is because if we were to say everything has always existed in one form or another, what that means is we are saying that there's an infinitely regressing past to our, let's use the word universe to just describe everything.
No. It's easy to look back at time and backwards in time and pretend that there's a problem with past being infinite. But we already acknowledged that time begins with the Big Bang, at least in that cosmological model. And so there wasn't time prior to that. And so the reason this seems absurd is because if you start looking backwards in time, you will get the impression that, wow, there's no way to span, from one moment to the next, or from 57 billion years ago to 56 billion years ago, which simply isn't true. The number line remains the same no matter how far it extends. We're just occupying this particular part of it. And it's the same sort of mistake. I'm sure the mathematicians will beat me up, but I have two ancestors, and each of those I have two parents. Each of those have two parents. Each of those have two parents. Each of those have two parents. And if you look at the world that way, that would give someone the impression that in the past there were many more people than they were today. And that is a mistake in understanding that sort of progression. So if you're just going to look at it and say, hey, we can't have an infinite regress, that may be true for an actual temporal timeline. But since time begins with Big Bang cosmology at the origin, there was no time before it. It means there was no time where there wasn't anything. And it doesn't matter. So it's like, here's the other thing. Aren't you convinced that God is infinite?
Yes.
Yeah. So the problems that you'd like to point to with an infinite regress for the universe, or actually let's call it the cosmos, because the universe is our current local presentation. The cosmos is the word that we tend to use for everything that ever was, and et cetera. So the problem that you have, or that you would like to point to with an infinite regress for the cosmos, exists for a God as well.
Well, I mean, by definition, when we define God as, supernatural or spaceless or timeless, it's like by definition, we are not, God is not bound to like natural laws or natural, that's the entire.
No. So first of all modern theologians would hold that God is bound to logic, that God can't violate logic, right?
I don't know if I agree with that, because to me,
So
if God
can
is,
God make a married bachelor? Can God make something simultaneously what it is and what it isn't?
yes, I believe so.
Okay, well that's patently absurd.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and once you do that, you are done with every conversation because you can't appeal to logic. You can't talk about what's irrational or not.
Well, that's irrational to us because, again,
No, no,
there
no.
is
There's no
certain
such thing as irrational to us. There's either rational or not.
concepts.
You see, if you get to throw out logic in order to claim that your God is exempted from it, then I can do the same thing for the universe and just claim that the universe is exempted from it. You don't get to say, by definition, God is excluded from this, because how you define something has no bearing on what it actually is. And you could define anything as being magically immune to logic.
Well, the reason I don't think it works for the universe is because, by definition, we describe the universe as natural. That's kind of the entire
No,
point of
so
science.
once again, Omar, whether or not it's natural doesn't mean you get to exempt it from the laws of logic.
Hmm. That, well, the entire that's the point of God. If this concept did not exist, then what is the point of the concept of God? You see what I'm saying? Like, it's
No,
kind of like you.
no,
I
I don't
really
see
don't.
what it seems is people look at the universe, look at the world, reality, and say, "Huh,
Mhm.
I don't have a good explanation for this, so I'm just going to make up something." And when people say, "Well, that has a problem here," I'm just going to say, "Well, my solution is exempt from that problem." Well, that has a problem here. Well, my solution is exempt from that problem. You can't ever demonstrate it. You have thrown logic out the window, which means now you can't argue.
And by the way, Omar, if
But
you
see,
want
that's
some
it.
extended rebuttals to some of the things that you're saying and you want to research and be able to try and improve the arguments you have in the future, when we started this call, I mentioned that you remind me of people like Catholics who then they don't want to defend the Catholic God. They just want to basically do a deistic Kalam defense. But the extended Kalam, the William Lane Craig extension to the Kalam, is the exact argument you're making. And it is well debunked. And you've come here seemingly apparently unaware of the things that we were definitely going to say to you regarding it. The assertions are
I don't
fun.
see how I don't see how you address what I brought up, though. I see how it doesn't sit well with you that God is defined as such. But if we're talking about God and that's how he's defined, then that is what we're talking about.
So, does the definition of something actually tell you what it is?
Hmm.
That's a question.
Yes.
No, it doesn't.
The defin. Hmm. Go ahead.
The definition of something doesn't tell you what it is. It tells you what people are claiming about it. Definitions are not prescriptive, they're descriptive.
So it tells us what we are conceptualizing in this case.
It certainly tells us what people think something is, but it doesn't tell us what it is. See, what you're trying to do is say that you're going to go with a because there's not just one definition for God. There are many different proposed gods. And what you're claiming is that you are going to present a definition for God and then assert that it's the right one and that it solves some problem. But your definition of God needs to be demonstrated to be correct first.
Well, I feel like that definition could basically be applied across like all religions. That's why I kind of
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many religions something could be applied to. That doesn't tell you whether or not it's true either, does it?
Correct. Yes.
So how many more irrelevant side points are we going to, that could apply to many different religions. Well, cool. I don't disagree, but if it turns out that all the religions are wrong, then what difference does it make that something could apply to many different religions?
Well, the reason I know that's not wrong is for the reasons I gave earlier, where if we kind of try to explain the coming to be of the cosmos, we have to break one of these boundaries of space and time.
No, that's an assertion. Okay. See this, now we're going in circles, Omar, because that's an assertion that you haven't demonstrated. And now you're using it to smuggle in your very definition. We need to know what definition of God we're going to be talking about, how you know that it's true, not, hey, I think when I look at the universe, I think we have to violate space and time in order to explain it. Well, maybe the correct answer is you can't explain it right now.
No, because so for example, the way
that's not the correct answer.
No, that's not the correct answer. And
okay, was there a time in human history where the correct answer was we can't explain that right now?
In regards to what?
The origin of the universe. What do you mean? I don't understand, Omar, how you can tell me. I don't understand how you can tell me. I don't understand how you can tell me that something's wrong and then not know what the fuck I'm talking about. Was there a time in human history where the correct answer to what is the origin of the universe is I don't know?
From a scientific perspective, in the sense of
what other perspective is there? Why is it you can't just say the obvious yes?
The other perspective is what I'm saying to you. What I'm saying to you is a concept. It's not a physical thing to be measured. This is a concept. If I'm talking about something outside of space and time, this can only be a concept. A human being will never be able to visualize an infinite number of particles in his mind. It's not a matter of knowledge. It's not about matter of lacking knowledge.
So now you're just babbling incoherently about irrelevant points.
And
because I'm asking about how we can know what the origin of the universe is, and you're talking about how a human being can't ever imagine infinity. That's completely irrelevant. Whether or not stop talking, whether or not a human being can ever properly conceptualize an actual infinity is irrelevant, especially if an actual infinity isn't capable of being actualized. But that has nothing to do with whether or not we can conceptualize something outside of space and time, which I'm saying I can't do that, and you're saying you can, and it's the right answer.
I'm saying it's the only, it's a, through deductive reasoning, it's the right answer.
No, it's not.
Like, for example, in the world
it's not deductive, and what I'm asking you is how did you determine that I don't know is the wrong answer? Because you said it was the wrong answer.
Well, if someone is to say that, give my argument has existed from the beginning of time, before we even understood.
Okay, we are done. We are done because I'm not wasting any time on someone who says their argument has existed from the beginning of time, because that's bullshit. When time began, there were no arguments, there were no minds, there were no concepts. You can't demonstrate that any of that existed from the beginning of time. Now you're just exaggerating because we've got you in a corner where you won't admit that I don't know was the probable answer and maybe the current correct answer. Instead, you want to say that it's wrong. Hey, what is something that if it exists outside of time, how long does it exist for?
Here's what I could say to that.
The question, I asked a question.
Yeah, sure. I heard that.
What was the question?
You just said something right before that.
I don't care what I said right before that. What was the question?
Well, go ahead, ask me again, because I was
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. I'm not going to ask you the question again. Why is it that I have to do all the heavy lifting in this conversation and you can't even be bothered to repeat the question you were just asked 10 seconds ago?
I'm trying my best here. You think I'm trying to get one over on you? I'm really just interested by this stuff, and I just like reading about it. And
well, then go read about it, because you're not paying attention to what I ask. You're not answering the questions. You're refusing to accept that I don't know could be the right answer. The question was, if something exists outside of time, how long does it exist for?
That's the question that's an irrational question.
What does it mean for something to exist outside of time?
that's an irrational. Like I can only explain or describe things to you within space and time. I can't explain.
Then why are you talking to me about a God that you assert is outside of space and time, sir?
Because I can demonstrate that something does exist outside of space.
No, you can't. And by your own admission, you can't even demonstrate that the concept is cogent. Meanwhile, it's not a cogent concept. Existence is necessarily temporal. Something that exists for no time is something that does not exist.
I guess you could say that. I don't know what that really means.
Okay, I can tell you what it means. I can tell you what it means. It's really simple. Something that exists for 10 seconds exists for 10 seconds. Something that exists for 5 seconds exists for 5 seconds. Something that exists for 1 second exists for 1 second. Something that exists for 0 seconds exists for 0 seconds. By definition, existence requires some period of time where the thing is. It is nonsensical to say that something is and yet does not persist. So something cannot exist outside of time.
Well, I think we demonstrate that something does, though. Like when we look at
no, you haven't. You haven't demonstrated that something does. You haven't demonstrated that something can.
You know, I had this conversation with Forrest Valkyrie one time.
Nobody gives a fuck who you've had the conversations with before. Right now, you're having.
Would you like me to fucking call him? I mean, he's not on today. He's not on today. Shut your hole. He's not on today. But if you'd like me to call him, I will. Why is Forrest relevant to this conversation?
Well, he had mentioned something. He had essentially described something as timeless space. You know, he had mentioned to me that, because I told him, I kind of came up with this kind of argument that if the law of conservation of energy is indeed correct, that is to say, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, then we know for a fact nature could not have created itself, because that means it would have had to violate its own law.
So the laws of thermodynamics apply within a closed system and within the universe. They don't apply prior to Big Bang cosmology. Prior to the Planck time, those things don't exist. You're trying to apply a property of the universe to something at the moment of the universe beginning. I don't know what Forrest told you, but my question was, why is it relevant? Why is anything Forrest said relevant to the conversation you're having with me right now?
Well, because it seems to be that what he had described, is that essentially what you're getting at? That you're saying? I
don't know, because I'm not Forrest and Forrest isn't here. You're talking to me and Jimmy. I don't give a shit what Forrest said. I don't care if he was right or wrong. What Forrest said is irrelevant to the conversation we're having right now. Anything else you'd like to flail on about before we move on?
Okay. No, it's definitely relevant. Maybe you didn't understand something, but of course me and him have
Hey, Omar. Hey, Omar. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you for trying to pretend that I'm the one that doesn't understand something. Goodbye.
Yeah, Omar literally said after the first time, the problem with his version of the Kalam argument, after the first time it was explained why it didn't make any sense, said that we hadn't engaged in it or in any way debunked it. And then it happened 2 more times, and clearly he still did not understand fundamentally the flaws with it. And again, literally, it's what I said at the very beginning. You just sound like a Catholic who's about to defend the Kalam because you think if you can get somebody to deism, you don't have to do any of the work to get them from deism to Catholicism. And that's why you want to just defend that. But they can't even do that. None of them can. Catholics or Muslims alike. It's just fucking stupid.
It's really, hey, you have that entire conversation where you can't be bothered to pay attention to the questions that are being asked. You're just waiting for your next turn to babble. You have no explanation for any of the things that you've asserted. You flatly say that you cannot engage on a concept outside of time, and yet you want to defend the notion of a God outside space-time and think that you've demonstrated that it must be true merely because you look at the world and given what you understand about it, you don't see how anything bound by space-time could ever be serve as an explanation. Well, the correct answer for why is there something rather than nothing may be because there can't be nothing. Nothing can't be. It can't be the case that there's nothing. Something has always been. Maybe that's the right answer. The answer for why is the current model of the universe what it is could be, I don't know. That I don't know how Omar, of all people, decided that I don't know isn't the right fucking answer. But if you say that I don't know is the right answer, you better damn well be ready to actually present how you know that. Because to suggest that the other people maybe you just didn't understand. Maybe you just didn't understand. Well, it's possible that that I didn't understand, but given I'm the only one that actually explained anything, and you're the one that just kept asserting things. Yeah. I think I do understand.
But when I called Forrest, I didn't feel stupid during that call, and I do feel stupid during this call. So the Forrest call must have been a better call. Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, Pokemon Master and Executive Producer on The Line. Would you like to support a specific show on The Line or The Line in general? There are special tiers on our Patreon and in our channel memberships. You can do just that. By the way, you could consider leaving a super thanks down below. You could also like, subscribe, and leave a regular comment. All of these are great. Now, I'm going to get back to crushing loneliness, but while I do that, why don't you check out one of these?